Hi, this is Zoe Routh, and this is episode 26. How good is your strategic plan? I bet you're making a bunch of mistakes that are easily avoidable, and I'm going to give you 7 amazing tips to make your plan rock. Let's do this.
Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, your source of strategies and insights to make you a better leader. Influence, improve, inspire.
Hey, so welcome. I've been watching and reading Spartacus. It's not your usual leadership fare, that's for sure. And one of the things you may not know about me is that I love historical fiction, and I particularly love the Roman era history. And Spartacus is if you don't know the story, is a slave rebel, a gladiator slave who led a revolt in 71 BC, I think. So before the Christian era, around the time of Julius Caesar, he and 70 other odd gladiators broke out of his ludus, the gladiator training school, and led a revolt, which ended up a whole bunch of slaves joining in and escaping their masters to join his slave army, up to 100,000 people. So over 2 years, they waged war against the Roman factions before they were ultimately defeated. So apart from loving the history, for me, it's also about asking the leadership questions. And I think as I'm watching this, I'm enjoying all the spectacle for sure, because the Stars show, which showed up on Netflix, is amazing. The filmography, the costumes, the storyline, the acting is all brilliant. It is very gory, and there are a lot of graphic sex scenes, so this is not something you watch with your kidlets. This is adult-only stuff, trust me on this one. So apart from the spectacle of the show, there's 4 seasons of it, it's also about the leadership insights that I got from this. And a story like Spartacus, there is a temptation to just default to the hero model, and they celebrate the man Spartacus as being an amazing leader who galvanized these troops, these gladiators, these slaves, to lead what we know turns out to be a lost cause, because eventually they're all killed. Spartacus is killed on the battlefield at the end by Crassus, one of the great warriors of the Roman era, generals, I should say. And though they never found his body, so his actual demise is not quite certain. So it is a lost cause. However, he is celebrated as the man who galvanized all these people. And I think it's easy just to say, well, what was it about Spartacus, this charismatic visionary that led his men and women against such an obstacle as the Roman Empire? And they were a formidable entity, the Roman armies. So what I've seen in terms of looking at this from a leadership insight is not just how one man can organize a rebellion of 100,000 people from dire circumstances. Like being a slave in the Roman era was no picnic, that's for sure. So apart from looking at that, I think what I'm reflecting on when I'm thinking about Spartacus is that he's a hero before their time. He's got this idea of freedom and how every man is born equal and they shouldn't have to live in slavery. And it's 2,000 years before the tide turns, and it is now more or less globally accepted that slavery is a bad thing. But it took 2,000 years before that actually shifted. It wasn't until the 1800s where you have the American Civil War around slavery and the abolishment of slavery in the UK that it became a bit more of a standard that slavery wasn't so acceptable. 2,000 years, that's a long time to be ahead of the time. And you can see this in other big leaders that sort of appeared before their time. And what I mean by that is that their ideas were ahead of their time. Their ideas were different to the status quo, which actually challenged the status quo. And we see this in Gandhi. We see this in Martin Luther King and JFK. And what do those 3 have in common, apart from having a message that rocked the status quo, is that they were all killed for their beliefs. So it's not actually a great rising testament to the power of being an advanced thinker, is it? If you challenge the status quo, you get killed. And that happened to Spartacus as well. And yet I would even put Obama in this category as well. So his integral thinking, so his advanced globalism and social consciousness, was well ahead of where the majority of Americans, and even indeed the rest of the civil world, exists. And he is kind of swimming against the tide, trying to lead the way, or was anyway. And you can see what happened in the backlash against this with the rise of Donald Trump in America, and the rise of nationalism and elsewhere in the world, including in Australia and Europe. So what can we learn from this? Well, I think there's a couple of things from leaders to ponder, is that dangerous ideas, ones that threaten the status quo, threaten worldviews and the systems that are built upon them, are very, very challenging and trigger survival mechanisms in the people who don't yet have that worldview. And so as leaders, it's not just that our ideas are good and liberating and want to make a big difference. That's the most important thing. We have to be compassionate and patient with the people that we lead, because when we offer an idea such as, oh, let's end slavery, it threatens a lot of what's important to the people who have built entire lives and systems around that. So why was there such a resistance to slavery? It's because businesses and societies and communities and a way of life was built around that. It's conveniently for those people that they shelve the fact that it's oppressive and negative for the slaves. There was a lot at stake for the individuals. So keeping that in mind is useful and important when we're looking at making social change. We can't just say, this is a better way of doing it, and if you don't follow it, then you're demented or backward or deplorable, as Clinton said. All right, so that's my deep little insight from the gory Spartacus series. Some news from me. We're getting ready to commence our first Leaders Edge Mastermind program. I'm so excited by this program. It kicks off with 4 days on the Lara Pinta Trail, which is in the middle of Australia out of Alice Springs, so in spectacular outback desert country. And we have 8 participants, and me and the World Expeditions crew are hosting the outdoor component, starting off there in the middle of May. And that commences a 12-month program for this group of leaders from all sorts of different sectors, from sugar, from the pork industry, from university sector, from professional services, to small business owners, and to the not-for-profit sector. They're all coming along. And they will be developing their leadership thinking and practice together as a group, as well as through executive coaching. So that's our first program that's kicking off. Our next one is going back to the Lara Pinta as well in September. So if you missed out on joining this program and you're curious about the next one, have a look on my website, zoerouth.com, and click on Mastermind, and all the details are there. And if you want to have a chat about it, feel free to reach out, zoe@innercompass.com.au. Love to chat with you and see if this is the right program for your development. All right. Oh, so what I'm reading lately, just finished Persuasion by Cialdini, Robert Cialdini. This is his latest book. And he's most famous for his original text, Influence, which is a seminal book on looking at how salespeople influence and persuade buyers. So it's kind of like a buyer's beware handbook, if you like. And yet a lot of the research and strategies in there are really useful to do good, not evil, when it comes to influence. And I'm reading lots of other books, too, around influence. So you can look forward to a podcast in the future on influence tactics. So I'll put a link in the show notes to the books that I recommend today. Persuasion by Cialdini is one of them, as well as his first book, Influence. And the show notes will be at zoerouth.com/podcast/strategic thinking. And that gets us on to the topic for today, which is, how about your strategic plan? It's, what month are we in? We're almost in May. And in Australia, this is budget time. So the governments, the various levels of government, are all about to table their budgets for the year. And a lot of organizations are also on a financial year that goes July till June. And typically May is when we table our budgets and make sure our plans are all in place. So what I often see with leaders, though, is that their strategic plans suck. It's amazing how bad they do suck. And if they are of any good at all, well, typically what happens is you write this big, grandiose strategic plan, and then it gathers dust on the shelf. It's not user-friendly at all. And I think strategic plans can be extremely helpful if they're done correctly, because they can guide insight and effective steps to moving your business forward and moving your leadership forward in a meaningful way that really matters to you and the people that you serve. So the first resource I point you to in this regard, I've mentioned her book a couple times, is Stacey Barr's book, Prove It. And it's a handbook for CEOs in terms of how to look at developing KPIs, key performance indicators, that actually make a difference. So how do you create measures that are meaningful? And this is related to strategic planning and strategic thinking, because often people do it backwards. This is typically what happens around budget time. Quick, let's write the budget. How much money do we think we're going to need to spend? How much money are we currently spending right now on the basics? And what are we going to do to make more money? That's sort of where it fits in. So, and what's our target for the income for the year? Big problem. Because who cares? What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's just targets. And starting with targets is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. Probably the other big mistake that people make is actually not having a plan at all, and that's being a reactive thinker. So people go into survival mode, and it's quick, scramble to get enough work in the door to keep the doors open. So that is a big mistake, is actually not having a decent plan at all and being in reactive. The third mistake is weasel words. This is Stacey's term from her books. And what she means by weasel words is those blancmange, stereotypical corporate speak that are wanky. Let's just put it plainly. So you might have something in your strategic plan is to be the most effective organization in sustainable outcomes. What the hell does that mean? What is sustainable and what is effective? And how can you see that? You can't see that. That is not a viscerally rich picture of anything. So be mindful as you have a look at your corporate speak problems in your strategic plan. And I point you also to Gabrielle Dolan's work called Jargon Free Fridays. Her YouTube videos are hilarious and they're well worth watching. So I'm just going to make a note to put that in the show notes as well, Gabrielle Dolan's Jargon Free videos. And she's got a great one if proposals were all written in corporate speak. So you'll be able to find yourself potentially in some of that jargon. Okay, so the mistakes are no plan. Second mistake is starting with targets. And the third mistake is using wiggle words. Another thing that's kind of subtle, but you can often see this when in strategic plans, when people combine targets and milestones and projects all into KPIs. So an example of, here's your KPI, and the KPI is produce a magazine. This is not a KPI, this is a project. So a KPI is a measure of activity, of results. And it's not about producing something in a one-off. It's actually about something that can be tracked as either improving or decreasing, such as customer engagement. So improving customer engagement, customer engagement is pretty wanky in terms of weasel words. It can be something more impressive or more useful than increasing customer happiness, which is slightly weaselly, but it's getting better. How do you measure happiness? Well, there's a whole bunch of ways you can measure happiness. So how can you help customers be happier? And when you start asking questions like that, all of a sudden you have pictures of happy customers. What do happy customers look like and sound like? And you think, well, happy customers brag about their work with you. Happy customers tell you how much they enjoy working with you. Happy customers write testimonials. And all of a sudden, you have a way to measure that. So you can measure amount of testimonials, you can measure amount of feedback, you can give them a customer service rating survey as an example of trying to measure these things. All right, what else? Okay, here's a tip first of all. So those were some of the mistakes. How can we change this? So with your strategic plan, a couple of big things that you can start with are starting with your result areas. So instead of thinking of targets, like how much money do we want to make, it's like what results do you actually want to produce through your work? And keep asking, well, why is that important until you get something meaningful? So the result areas that you might be looking at are, I'm trying to give you an example of mine. Hang on, where did I put that example? Here we go. So here's an example of results in my business, so big picture ones. Organizations improve their contribution to community and planet. So that's a big result for the work that I do. And here's another one. Leaders enjoy their work and lives. So that's the bigger picture purpose of my business. And it kind of fits into what Simon Sinek says in his book, Start With Why, is you got to start with why. And when you're starting with why, you look at what is the difference that this work is going to make and why is that important. So you start there with your strategic plan. And then you go to which are the result areas that you want to work on. So in my particular strategic plan, there are working with organizations and their contribution to community and planet. There's another aspect of my work, which is working exclusively or one-on-one with leaders so that they are enjoying their work and lives. And a subcategory of that is being effective in their work and life. So effective is kind of a weaselly word, so I'd have to tease that out a little bit. So what does effective mean in terms of being an effective leader? And I would break this down into they communicate better, they make better decisions, and so on. So you start with the result areas, then you look at the individual results, then you develop measures for that. So we kind of started talking a little bit about that in the developing measures for client happiness. So what do you see people doing, saying, feeling, or experiencing as a result of your work? And once you have that, you can start to be able to measure improvements in performance or activity. Then you can set a target for that. So once you know what the baseline is, you can set an improvement target. So if you have a measure for client happiness that says the number of testimonials that we receive increases, so that's a measure, then you have a target of, well, we get, let's say, 1 testimonial a month. Maybe your target is to get 3 per month. And then what you do, and this is the strategy part, is how do we improve that result? Now you're starting to think like a strategic thinker. So instead of going, these are the strategies we're going to play, how are we going to measure that, and you don't even think about results, you kind of reverse engineer it. What is the result? What is the measure? What are the targets? And then what are the improvement initiatives or the strategic activities that take place? This is such a radically important idea. It sounds so simple. I just want to go ding some bells around it. Ding, 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 ding. How important this is in terms of revolutionizing how you do strategy. So, okay, did you get that? How important that was? Okay, good. Now, let's talk about what linear thinking is characterized by and the benefit to linear thinking. So some of this, what we've talked about, is linear thinking, right? Results, measures, targets, improvements. So it's kind of, well, step by step. And there's benefits to this as a leader, as being a linear thinker. So it's characterized by lists, flowcharts, and their corollary Gantt charts as a starting point and end point, and it has progress bars. I love progress bars. You know, that's when you measure, you have something that goes, we're improving, and the bar goes up. Kind of like the thermometer you've seen perhaps on fundraising initiatives that indicate, whoa, we're at this much on the thermometer. And then as you get more results in, more donations, up it goes. Progress bars are extremely motivating, as Dr. Jason Fox has written in his book, Game Changer. Always forget the name of that book. It's because they wrote it vertically. I have such a problem remembering it. Okay, so in Game Changer, Dr. Jason Fox talks about making progress visible is one of the most important things to getting employee buy-in and motivation. Haha. So any way that you can make your progress visible, like through a progress bar, that's going to be important. So these are all characteristics of linear thinking that are extremely useful at any stage of your leadership development and leadership thinking evolution. So the benefits of linear thinking are they show progress, which we mentioned is very important for motivation. They create a sense of achievement, which is also important for motivation, and they create movement and momentum. So this is really important to getting off the ground and getting into action. So there's huge benefits of linear thinking. However, we can become even more effective than a linear thinking. So we've seen in the past podcasts what it means to be a reactive thinker, where you're just on the back foot and you're hopping around trying to bootstrap and get on with it. And there's some benefits to that. And we need to take some of those mindsets forward. There's benefits in being a linear thinker, which I've just outlined. And what we want to progress towards is towards being a systems thinker. Why? Is because it allows you a lot more nimble responsiveness and far-reaching proactive planning. So how do you do that? It starts again with start with why. So that part of the linear thinking applies also to systems thinking. You need to be purpose-driven in your focus. And your why for what you're doing needs to be deep and powerful and meaningful to you and the people that you want to engage with. So that's the first aspect of moving towards a system thinker. You then want to have multi-level plans. What I mean by that, so we've just talked about results for business, and that's really important. The next layer of the multi-level plan is look at the systems that produce those results. Now you're starting to move into systems thinking. And so it's not just about looking at results, it's looking at what are the systems that we have in place and the systems that we play within that create these results. So an example of this, the systems that we have in place might be we have a sales system, we have a client recruitment system, we have a client engagement system. Where are the improvements we can do in each of those systems to improve our results? So that's one aspect. The other aspects of systems thinking is, well, what are the systems that we sit within? What is the economic system, the political system, the social system that we sit within that have an impact on us and our clients? And are there ways of influencing or working within those systems that we can do better to produce better results? Okay, so that's multi-level plans there. We also need to have multi-stakeholder plans. So this is not just about you and your clients, it's about your clients, your staff, your community, and your society. When you start to have multi-stakeholder plans, the richness and effectiveness of your strategy broadens and has a more far-reaching consequences that are meaningful to you and everybody that you come across. And the other aspect is to have a multi-dimensional strategy. So what does that look like? So we've talked mostly about strategy in terms of you start with results, then you move to measures, and then you look for improvement initiatives. That's one aspect. Multi-dimensional strategic planning includes that. It also includes culture, so your corporate culture. How are you going to grow, evolve, maintain that? It includes leadership. How are you going to expand and grow your leadership thinking as a leader, and also the leadership thinking within the organization. So you have leaders growing leaders. And the fourth element is around contribution. So that sort of links back to the purpose with why. So how is that built into your strategic improvement methodology and what you're actually going to be focusing on for the year? So just to summarize, the 4 improvement areas for moving towards systems thinker is a purpose-driven focus, multi-level plans, multi-stakeholder plans, and multi-dimensional plans, strategy, culture, leadership, and contribution. Another way to expand into systems thinking is your horizons. So typically in a strategic plan, well, it used to be the 5 to 10 year strategic plan. Nobody does those anymore, I don't think. We now have 3-year strategic intentions with 1-year strategic plans per se. When we're thinking about strategy, we want to have different horizons in mind. And they get fuzzier as the further out they go. So you have your yearly horizon, you have your decade horizon, your lifetime horizon, so when you cack out and leave the planet, and then we have generational horizon and multi-generational horizon. That is very big picture thinking that's really important for you to consider. The other aspect of your plan to consider is the impact, local, national, and global. And then your web impact, not like the internet web, but your customers' customers. When you think about what is the impact on my customers, that's one dimension. And then you think about what is the impact on my customers' customers, and do I have that integrated into what we're doing? There you have it. That is my best tips on how to go from linear thinker to systems thinker, and what mistakes to avoid when it's your strategic planning time. In the meantime, live well, lead well.